Welcome to the New York Times podcast. I saw your Maserati at 106 in Park. That thing was cute. Of music, news, and criticism, I am your host, John Caramonica.
The United States of America. Government of the people. The United States of America.
That was Two Live Crew, banned in the USA. Back when banning things, back when banning art, back when that meant something. That was a different time. It's a different era. I had the opportunity to talk to Uncle Luke, Luther Campbell from Two Live Crew as part of our 50 Rappers package, which came out a couple days ago. This year, depending how you do these calculations, is the 50th anniversary of hip hop or 50-ish anniversary of hip hop. It is the 50th anniversary of something, but where you believe hip hop started may be different from where this conventional marketing opportunity tells you that it started. Be a free thinker, do your research, think through it, try to come to some understanding on your own. That said, in coordination with all of media, we decided to do some coverage and we figured, let's just go to town. So myself, Joe Coscarelli, hi Joe, Joe's here.
Hey, I'm here.
And some of our friends, we spent the last 3 months. Karen, in her tweet, said approximately 500 plus hours. And I'm actually just going to say it's more.
I'm going to say it's more than 3 months. 3 months is...
definitely more than 3 months.
Yeah, that's
Fair.
a conservative estimate.
Yes, to be fair, we probably slow walked February if we're going to keep it a buck.
Don't tell Karen.
Sorry. But yes, more than 3 months, more than 500 hours. Myself, you, some of our friends, two of whom are going to join us shortly, Elena Bergeron and Keith Murphy, interviewed 50 rappers across generations, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, all regions, mainstream, underground, regional heroes, anti-heroes, reviled, adored. We really tried to hit everything.
Good rappers, bad rappers.
That's hey,
Who's to say?
if I say that there's one bad rapper on this list,
Blind item.
blind item, and it's not who you think it is, I'll say I don't know that there's a bad rapper on this list, but if there's a bad rapper on this list, it's not who you think it is. I just want to say that. Whoever you think it is, it's not that person. This was an incredible undertaking that has been eating us alive for the last couple months, especially. How are you feeling, first of all, now that it's in the world?
It's the lamest possible word I could say, but proud, I think is the first one to come to mind. I try not to be that guy I'm so proud of this work I did, but
I feel exactly the same. I hope that I do work, generally speaking, week in, week out, that's meaningful and thoughtful and considered and maybe even occasionally useful or important. But I rarely feel like I felt when this published, and I texted it to you and Karen. On God, I wept when this published. Partially, I'm sure, because of the come down of just months of stress, lack of sleep, etc. But part of it is I really left it all on the field. Really left it all on the field.
I want to unpack why I feel more where I would use the word proud in a way that I wouldn't normally with the work that we do day in and day out. I'm very much, I come to the office, I punch my time card, I do my job, I care about it. There's some passion in there.
Pedro, can you put a punching time card audio, like a thunk? Can you just add that in there? Sorry, I'll be quiet for a sec. Okay, thank you.
This was more, I feel like we really got out of the way here. There was a lot of labor, obviously, but the fact that it is all done in as told to style, it's oral histories, but it's not oral histories in the way that we're used to of sort of one line, one character at a time. Everybody gets to tell their own story. And as somebody who just wrote a book about rap music and modern rap music and realized the sort of dearth of historical information that is out there, especially digitally, about the most important American art form of my lifetime, certainly, and arguably much longer than that. So just knowing that this will live for as long as www.nytimes.com/hiphop50 lives.
Vanity URL.
It felt like a little bit like, not to get too highfalutin about it, but a little bit like public service.
Look, I've been doing this a long time. For those who don't know, prior to me coming to the Times, I've been at the Times 15 years. Prior to that, I worked at Vibe as the music editor. Prior to that, I was on a staff writer at Double XL. I wrote for The Source, wrote for pretty much every hip hop magazine imaginable from 1997 till when I came to the Times in 2008. This is the music of my childhood. This is the music that made me the person I am. And all of my critical perspective is rooted in what I listened to and who I learned from listening to this music. And so it does feel like it was an opportunity to give back something and try to capture something essential about the music that I agree with you is not always on the internet. We were very careful. Yes, we're doing 50 people, but we're not ranking. There's no order. The goal is not to start arguments. What we really tried to do, and you can read, there's a methodology box. You can read all about it. There's an essay that I wrote. You can read all about it. Hip hop is so huge and so vast. It has multiple competing narratives. We wanted to find a way to tell as many parts of the story as possible. We tried not to be redundant in terms of people who were from the same place at the same time, same era, same region, same era. We wanted to capture what it was like in the 70s in New York, but also what it was like in the 90s in Houston, and also what it was like in the Midwest in the 2000s, and so on and so forth. We were very careful about that, very deliberate about that. And I am, it does feel, at least for me, a little bit like a culmination of 20 some odd years of work. And now it's just that, and it's just one URL.
It's just one URL.
It's just one URL. Just click through that or click through a news story about the Miranda Lambert photo thing. Yeah, it's all the same. Just one URL. Before we bring Murph and Elena on, I do want to say we're going to talk about the other folks who helped us with interviews later, but I just want to thank everybody who was involved in getting this done, who are not me and Joe. That's Karen. Obviously, Karen edited everything that ends up in this package. And Karen...
Many thousands of words.
Many thousands of words. And shepherded this through all the hoops that it needed to be shepherded through. Amanda Webster, photo editing. There are photos in this package I've never seen. There were in the sort of polls, photos of people I just never seen this Cameron photo, never seen this E40 photo. There were Vanilla Ice photos I'd never seen, although I think the one that we ran, I think I had. But just an incredible gathering of archival photos because we really wanted to capture people in their early glory years to show what hip hop looked like in 1978 and 1984 and 1993 and so on and so forth. Design, Gabrielle Gianardoli, Jenny Lee, Tala Safie. If I'm messing the pronunciations up, forgive me. Produced by Alicia DeSantis, Lucky Benson, Josie Sedgwick. Dave Renard helped with editing. Research, Chris Quo, and real heavy hitter Alain Delacarrière really came through with the public records. This didn't happen alone, didn't happen with just us. It happened because we all committed to doing it and doing it at what we felt was the highest level that we could do it. And I'm personally eternally grateful for everybody's contribution in this.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Let's bring Murph and Elena on, and we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. Murph, what's good?
What's popping, homie?
My former colleague at Vibe, longtime friend, part of this package. Elena Bergeron is here.
Hi.
Elena, current colleague, assistant editor on the sports desk. Solidarity.
Appreciate you.
But for our purposes, Elena, a longtime music and sports journalist as well. Joe and I did heavy lifting in this package. We had a number of people help out with the interviews. The people who did the bulk of the remainder are right here with us, Murph and Elena. So I wanted us to all get together because one thing that I felt in reading all the transcripts of the interviews that I did not do was that there was a lot of joy in these transcripts. There was a lot of wistfulness, a lot of happiness. One thing that I found in the interviews I did do was that I felt like I was talking to a different version, especially of people I've interviewed several times, talking about memories, talking about childhood, starting with that and talking about early influence, put people in a very reflective mood and almost like a tiny bit tender. And I think it might be interesting to maybe go around and each of us talk about an interview that maybe got unexpectedly, whether it's intimate or vulnerable or just like insightful in a way that maybe you hadn't anticipated. Elena, was there anything that popped in your mind?
Oh, for sure. The Too Short interview. Absolutely.
Okay,
Because
tell us.
Too Short is too short. Like, I have a
Sure
million
is.
things to say about him. I got a million quotables. None of them are tender. But yeah, starting off with that first conversation about how did you get into rap? What is your first memory of this thing? And him coming up with this basic scene of his dad's stereo setup. And I'm thinking like the big cabinet size speakers, whatever. And he's absolutely not. My dad was an audiophile. We had smaller speakers. They were set up like this. There was a particular spot in the living room where I knew I could sit for like best sound quality. And I know he didn't get home until 6 o'clock. So I had this hour and a half to just like zone out and listen to these specific records, which I knew
Such
if
a
I
good
like,
detail.
yeah,
good
if I
detail.
played this and then I played this, they were long enough that you had 2 spins for each record. And by that time, my dad would be home. It was like, what? It was not what I expected. I don't know that I had an expectation for what he was going to say, but like that one was really touching. And then for him to come back around to the idea that like his mom found his rhyme book when he was younger.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so
Oh,
good.
yeah, that was a
It's
great
really
one.
good.
Yeah, and like he was so sincere about it. She found the rhyme book, and you know what's funny? Like I remember this from the Will Smith memoir too, because I think he said something similar about his grandmother, like finding his rhyme book, and he was cursing at that time. And Too Short said the same thing. Like she found it, it was nasty. She wrote me a letter and had all these things in it about like how could you do this? I know you're better than this. And he was like, man, almost brought a tear to a brother's eye. And I was like, yes, so what happened? He was like, thank you, Todd
I
Shaw.
also just imagine scolding Too Short, just as like a sidebar, just like imagining
I
Too
liked
Short.
also that he was like still defiant about it to this day, a little bit, right? Like he was still like, Mom, I'm an artist. How dare you?
And also like imagine telling James Brown not to gyrate or
Yeah.
something like that, or giving him a
Incredible.
hard time for
Yeah.
gyrations. Such a great
It was
comparison
a
point.
wonderful parallel because I was like, okay, facts. Yeah. I was like, born a Mac. This man is born a Mac. He explained it to his mom. He's not going to have a problem with C. Dolores Tucker, R.I.P.
Murph, what about you? What pops to your mind? You had a couple of real emotional ones, I thought.
Yeah, I had some emotional ones. The DMC one was really emotional towards the end because he started getting under how was it like to hold hip hop on your shoulders and be like these superheroes Run DMC were, while at the same time being depressed, right? You're depressed. You're in the biggest group of all time. You're just doing drugs and guzzling down OE, and you just think that you're on top of the world. And then you hear Big Daddy Kane in somebody's car, and it's just become a mind, you know what? And DMC just really was eloquent. He didn't really take himself too seriously. He understood who he was, but he gave props to the people that came before him, the long rhyme that he did. He worships at the altar of Casanova and all those guys and Treacherous 3 and all those folks. But he really gives it up to people that came after him, which I really found that interesting because Run himself was a lot more, oh, this MF, this guy's nothing. He's nobody. You know what? Who are you?
Okay, so I will say something, just a little peel the process back, right? Basically, the way that we handle it is we asked everybody roughly the same set of questions. But obviously with the goal of if there's tangents or things go in a certain direction, like just chase whatever direction it goes. But we kind of wanted the story arcs of each of the oral histories to be roughly similar. But one thing I learned very early on in doing these interviews, one of the questions was who took influence from you? Who did you see coming up after you? And this was like this is like an AP question. This is like an advanced level question that was so hard for a lot of people to answer. And I think it was a combination of this thing that you're describing, Murph, which is like a little bit of like hubris. Hey, those people who came after me, they ain't really do it. And also, I do think
soft. Everyone after you is soft.
Of course.
Exactly.
But also, I do think it's a little bit of like people really know what happened before them because it's what they grew up on. And they knew what happened in their moment because it's when they were the most popping. But they're not paying the granular detail of attention to what happens after. So I found in the first 2 or 3 interviews, you had this combination of I don't know / I don't want to say, even if I do know.
And that's Kool Keith. He's the epitome of that. When you read Kool Keith's interview, he's almost, I'm trying to get him to say something about MF Doom. And God bless him there. And he's recorded with MF Doom. He loves MF Doom. But he can't get himself to say, that guy followed me. Because in Kool Keith's mind, I'm the only weirdo on the block, right? But he loves that dude. But the tension that he had, particularly with Public Enemy, was just, he was throwing a little shade here and there. Like, yeah, they was doing political stuff, but we was doing all that stuff first. We just didn't have the label that Def Jam was. So yeah, it's interesting hearing these artists be very nostalgic, but at the same time kind of marking their territory.
I will say, and I want to come back to this, because one thing I was surprised I didn't see more of in the raw transcripts was score settling. And maybe that's just because we didn't set it up for that. That wasn't the goal. But I kind of was expecting a little bit here and there. But we'll come back to that.
I think you should probably mention, though, that was like more of the guys' side of things. I think the women rappers that were involved in the package were very intentional about saying, no, I love the young girls that are coming up now. No, I love that there are so many different people, with one notable exception.
Except Azalea Banks. And I also think I'm also really relieved, frankly, to have done this package in this time frame. If we had done the same exact package 3 years ago, I think those same women would have had a hard time pointing to the current moment and saying, look at how much is happening. We're really in truly a huge flowering moment. So it was actually great to have people be on the record and be like, I'm paying attention. But no, I think that's totally right. And I think it's also just because of how signature this moment is. That was great to see.
Just while we're on that tangent, though, I will say, when you're talking about the younger artists and even women talking about other women, it's often just rattling off a list of names in a way that like your mom might do, right? They're like, oh, I heard that Coi Leray song on the radio. Like, that's cute.
Damn.
And they're like, when you have artists speaking about artists that came after them, there's not as much detail and texture in the stories. It's, oh yeah, I've seen this on my Spotify at the gym. That kind of vibe.
Joe, talk to me about an interview that really struck you in this same way, in this kind of vulnerability way.
I interviewed some younger rappers, less of the old school folks. And I think what struck me a lot was the sort of present day stuff, in particular from Gucci Mane and from Lil Baby, and the way that they spoke about their current circumstances. These are guys that I've spoken to a lot, or I've thought about a lot. I've consumed a lot of information about them for all kinds of reasons. But to hear them speak about where hip hop has brought them today and the way and the examples they used, I found to be really moving. Gucci was basically saying, by the time I got out of jail, I thought maybe my moment was going to be over. But in fact, I'm more successful than ever. I'm in my 40s now. I'm making more money than I ever have. And I'm seeing the world. He was like, I thought I never would want to leave where I'm from. And here I am in Iceland. I think this got cut, but we were talking about this amazing Instagram of him that I think about constantly, where he's in a lagoon in Iceland and he just can't believe it. And I'm in a lagoon. Here I am in a lagoon. And he was talking about how the sun never went down there. And he just never thought not only that he would be there, but that he would be able to be there. He didn't have a passport. He was a felon, all kinds of stuff like that. And Baby had a similar example where we were on video chat. He was in his office. He'd just gotten back from out of town. And I have a pile of mail around me. Like, I have 300 pieces of mail from being out of town. I can't believe that I have mail. Just even that little thing just showed him that he had made it and that he was not only a real adult, but a breadwinner and a bill payer and a successful member of society.
And not floating below the sort of like legal economy, essentially.
Exactly. And I think that comes through. And there's a lot of that from Project Pat to Lil Bibby and Lil Baby. You have these guys who think of themselves as street dudes and never thought they would be businessmen, let alone seminal artists for history.
There's a good thing that unfortunately didn't make the Project Pat thing, that Murph interviewed Project Pat about how Project Pat was doing like counterfeit money frauds with someone who
Yes.
worked at Loud. I mean, allegedly, please, no, I don't want to hear from anybody. But there's like a whole thing that I just couldn't figure out how to make it make sense in the package, but about how he was like running counterfeit money frauds, like while like Chicken Head was popping still, or
Yeah,
like
while he was a successful
I was a
artist.
successful artist. Yeah. Anyway, so there's some of that. I'm glad you brought up Baby, because I feel like Baby is obviously like, that's a contemporary rap superstar at the top.
Right.
I think the person I want to talk about is actually the polar opposite, and probably the hardest interview that I did, which is DJ Hollywood. So there are a couple things that I wanted to achieve by putting DJ Hollywood in. Number one, I think there might be some people who would say DJ Hollywood is not a rapper in the classic sense. And I think that's probably true in like some purist way. But what DJ Hollywood was doing by being in the disco, talking over records, catchphrasing, a lot of that stuff ends up setting the template for what would end up in battles, like with Treacherous 3 or the Cold Crush, and then eventually what would end up on records, especially in the first 2 or 3 years of recorded hip hop. And so I wanted to kind of like trouble the notion of what a rapper was. This is also why I wanted to include DJ Jubilee, who Elena interviewed, who did a tremendous amount of formative work in Bounce, but I don't think is necessarily thought of as the rapper of the scene.
Not a wordsmith.
No, but a lot of words. So part of the reason I wanted to put Hollywood in there was that part of it was what Hollywood was doing predates the 50th anniversary. And like part of what we're trying to do in this package, even though the number 50 is on it, is try to underscore the ways in which anniversaries and things like this are like fabrications. But DJ Hollywood has not had an easy life. And he was extremely direct about the years that he struggled with addiction, how when he wanted to be in the clubs and people started doing live performances and then moving on to recorded music, he was high and he was having a series of moments of feeling himself and thinking, I'm the king of the world. This will never unseat me. And sure enough, it did. And then he lost years and years to addiction. He's clean now. He told me he was trying to get a radio job. You know, he's like pulling together like a reel to try to get a radio job, like almost in a weird way, parallel to what Joe, you were talking about with Lil Baby about going legit. Here's DJ Hollywood in his 60s, I believe, also trying to go legit, but after like a far more challenging stretch of time. Here is someone who is not always thought of, not always in these conversations. You always have Herc and Grandmaster Flash and Bambaataa, with the sidebar to say that Bambaataa has been in the headlines for some unpleasant things as well. But the prior generation, Grandmaster Flowers, DJ Hollywood, are not always as discussed. And Hollywood says this anniversary isn't for guys like me. That's not what this is. Like, this is for guys from the 80s, essentially. Run DMC, LL, Kane, etc. No one's coming to help me. And it was I found it a very affecting conversation. It was really tough. Here's someone who doesn't have a lot of recordings because he wasn't a recording artist. There's almost no real way to anthologize him. You know, if Numero Group wants to track down a bunch of DJ Hollywood live sets and do all the work of licensing what he was playing while he was talking, I'd buy the shit out of that box set. But same thing with talking to Easy AD from the Cold Crush Brothers. I asked him, this did not make it into the piece, but like I asked him, Jay-Z said that he was overcharging for what they did to the Cold Crush. And I was like, have you ever talked to Jay-Z about that? And he said, I've met Jay-Z, and Jay-Z's never anything other than respectful, but we've never had a conversation, and that didn't do anything. There was no bump. There was no Cold Crush bump that came on the back of that. And so I think as we're celebrating these 50 or so years, it's important to remember that what we think of as hip-hop's success is not equally applied to all participants. And there are a lot of people who are being left out of the conversations, and who we chose to put in the package is like, in part, you don't want to say it's redress, but we want to get as many people in contention and in the conversation as possible without leaning on the familiar, obvious folks who I think are always called on to talk for stuff like this. Elena, can we talk about Jubilee a little bit? Because I found his entry to be, first of all, the raw transcript, we should just publish that as a book.
I'm down.
The raw Jubilee transcript is out of control.
It is the most New Orleans conversation that there could be. That is a local icon.
Oh, yeah. Him talking, like when you asked him, did any like unexpected fans, and he like names like the local football coach. And I was just like, this is whole, like, I was hoping people would say like Bill Clinton or something. And he's, the local football coach.
Which, like,
Incredible.
It just speaks to, like, this man is totally content with being super famous in Louisiana. And there were other people he mentioned, right? Because, like, our state senators have invited him to different, like, CBC stuff in D.C. And so I know that this man has rapped in front of Obama or other people before. But, like, in his mind,
Send a
he's
video.
like,
If you have DJ Jubilee rapping stop, pause, do the Jubilee all in front of Barack Obama, send that video to podcast@nytimes.com.
Video of Solange and Beyonce rapping along and dancing to Jubilee all. And I'm like, thought you were going to say that. You sure did not. But it's also because in New Orleans, DJ Jubilee has spent a significant amount of time being a football coach. And so that's how I have kept afloat. Like, I still do these shows. People love me. People know this music. People sample me all the time. But I've also been a special needs educator in the public school system for X amount of years. And I coach football and girls softball or whatever else. And so, yes, JT Curtis
Still has a job. Still has a day job.
1,000%.
Like, I remember we had to schedule his interview around his day job.
And part of it is sad because he stopped coaching in the past year, in part because of all the gun violence in New Orleans. So there were very many players that he's had through the years that he saw die, and he had to like nurture teams through that, and he's sick of it. And so I was like, but yeah, that coaching name has a bunch of state titles. And so he was just like super happy that guy knew who he was. And I was like, that's fine. Like, to your point about DJ Hollywood, I sort of like and really respect the fact that these guys are very honest about what has happened in their lives and where they are in their lives. To me, it's way sadder when you interview somebody and they're completely delusional about what has happened to them, or want to lay it at the feet of somebody who's now famous and they owe me specifically X amount of money, because, and it's like,
Leave Vanilla Ice alone. Leave Vanilla Ice alone.
I'm so glad, because that is literally what I was just about to pivot to. So I was just about to pivot, because if you're going to contrast two interviews in this package, you could have on one side DJ Hollywood or DJ Jubilee, and on the other side you would have Vanilla Ice, who for logistical reasons I was unable to interview. I've interviewed Vanilla Ice before. I would have been happy to interview him again.
how did he get in?
What do you... Vanilla Ice, dog.
Had to be in there. Yeah, had to be in there.
I don't want to get too deeply into what we couldn't get or couldn't reach, but I emailed Hammer, I DM'd Hammer. I did the work. I just want to say, I did the work. I'd have been happy to have them both. But first of all, like, part of the package is like, you want a blend of purist favorites, idiosyncratic, pop crossover, subcultural, regional. Like, it's Vanilla Ice apparently has played for the Taliban. That's what I learned.
Represents something. It represents probably a few things, but definitely something.
Do you think that Vanilla Ice has actually played for the Taliban?
Honestly, if we were, one of the great things about As Told To and the sort of oral history format is, you just let people rock and you're like, okay, you're reading this knowing that this is somebody telling all of their big fish stories. Vanilla Ice takes that to the extreme, you might say, but I doubt every word he says, and I doubt none of what he says at the same time.
He really means it. Like, he really means it.
He really means it. Just a small amount of background. John, you've interviewed Vanilla Ice before. I had never interviewed Vanilla Ice. I took this on from vacation. I was at the beach. I'm like, I'm just going to do a quick 42 minutes and out with Vanilla Ice. That is not how interviewing Vanilla Ice goes. This man knows how to steer a conversation. He has a lot of feelings about becoming a general contractor, which he has been for decades.
When I interviewed him, I went on job site with him.
Yep. Taxes, Trump, Hammer, Eminem, the 90s. Like, we could have run, I should just pull up my transcript. He spoke for 2+ hours about whatever he wanted, no matter how many times I asked a question, but also a quote machine, just a quote machine. And sometimes a character is all you need.
We'll come back right after this, talking about more people who had a lot to say. I regret to inform you, Or not really. Here's Ice Ice Baby.
Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby.
All right, stop, collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me tightly, flow like a harpoon daily and nightly.
Will it ever stop?
Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll glow. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. Light up a stage and wax a chump like a candle. Dance, crush a speaker that booms. I'm killing your brain like a poisonous mushroom.
Okay, we're back. Elena is wincing. Murph's rocking with it. I know.
I'm not rocking with it. I'm just,
Why are y'all still litigating 1990?
it is just one of those things that when you just remember where you were when it happened and you just say, God damn it.
I want to say that I always preferred Hammer. Just gonna put it out there. No shots. Everybody plays their part. I do want to talk about another long interview, which is 50 Cent. Look, one thing I genuinely love about 50, a real rock on tour, like really has lived a wild life, an unexpected life, and is not shy about sharing it and wants to tell you about it. Also, I think out of all the conversations I had, there were only a few that I thought really got into what I would describe as like meta commentary about envisioning how other people might view them as opposed to telling their own story. And 50, I think, was really sharp in understanding how he was perceived, both recalling the moment in the early 2000s in his early career and how he might have been perceived then and also now. And it's always reassuring when you're talking to someone who has a sense of them, famous person who has a sense of themselves both from inside their celebrity and also outside their celebrity. That's not something that everybody is good at, I can assure you, having done this for a really long time. But 50 gets it, and 50 likes to talk. We talked for almost 2 hours for this. Tremendous amount on the cutting room floor. That's another book right there. Joe, what song did we did? Many Men Wish Death for 50?
Yeah, we put Many Men. What do you think about that choice in retrospect?
Pointed.
Yeah.
So let's listen to Many Men Wish Death.
Many, 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 many men wish death on me, Lord. I don't cry no more. Don't look to the sky no more. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on my soul. Somewhere my heart turned cold. Have mercy on many.
Elena, you had a lot of chatty interviews. I read your transcripts.
Yeah, I had a lot of chatty ones.
Tell me who sticks in your mind.
RZA was probably the chattiest, and I think mostly just because of the arc of what his life has been within rap and then beyond. And he had a lot to say about his formative years and his family's trouble with housing and getting kicked out of places and being homeless and bopping around, but like listening to a lot of different music from all the boroughs, basically. And then, like, when you get to that point where you're sort of asking, where's the weirdest or the farthest place that hip hop is taking you? Like Gucci Mane, in a lagoon in Iceland. RZA is somebody that was like, yeah, I was on the red carpet at Cannes and people were excited to see me. And that's a thing. And so I think for him, it was good to get all of that out and talk about him getting into film. But what was striking to me, and there's certain names that you see through a lot of these interviews because some people in hip hop have been around for everything. And so he's talking about doing the Kill Bill soundtrack and LL Cool J pulling him aside and going, no, for real, this is big. This is not just big for you. This is big for hip hop. And like similarly, like getting nominated for a BAFTA and like hearing that from some of his peers or people that he idolized, you could tell like what that meant. And besides that, just hearing him say the name Jim Jarmusch, butter, magic for the rest of my day. I was like, yes,
Yeah.
RZA, say it again.
Shout out to Ghost Dog. Classic.
Exactly.
Also, I will say one thing I really loved about the RZA, the excerpt we ran, but also just the larger transcript. I felt like he was speaking about it. It's as if he was relating the story that was someone else's. There was like a narrative quality to how he was talking about himself. He was almost talking about himself in third person without necessarily talking about himself in third person. There was like a little
Like
bit
he
of
was a
like
bystander, like he was his
watching
own
this
bystander.
thing and relating the tale. That was pretty fascinating, I thought.
He and several other members of Wu-Tang very much hold the collective story of Wu-Tang very dear. And so when they talk about it, they try to relate, like, why did you sign this deal in this way so that everybody could become free agents? Or later on, when he talks about the business of Wu-Tang still makes millionaires out of people. When you talk about like Wu-Tang, the American Saga, and the lead actor from that now is a millionaire. And he's like, that, how could you have ever predicted that this would be such an enterprise that could sustain us and create agency and financial freedom for us in our lives? I think you get the sense that he, like I said, he just holds the story of Wu-Tang very dearly. He's very cognizant of what it means to people. And I think like when you have that kind of following in that peer group, the story isn't always yours to tell, even if you are narrating this in the first person.
There's so many accepted narratives. Like, we're so far into the history of the genre that there's a lot of accepted narratives. And it was really nice to just unravel that a tiny bit. Not to say people didn't love Run DMC or LL Cool J or Big Daddy Kane or Nas. Obviously, people love those people and those people were formative. But it was nice to get under the hood of that a little bit and not feel like it didn't feel rote to me. And even like I think about Earl Sweatshirt, for example. Earl's a really good example of someone who is like as much of a scholar of the music as anybody on this episode, if not more. Like just an incredibly close listener.
A true rap nerd, for real.
Yeah. Crazy rap nerd. For him, even saying like my first exposure to hip hop was hearing a Rob bass tape in 2001. Like, why was I listening to a Rob bass? Just it's not something that I don't know when else that would come up. Like, I didn't search Earl Sweatshirt Rob bass. Maybe he's told that story 100 times. I don't know. But it was nice to feel like it was a non-canonical way to think about canonical people. And I think that came up again and again.
Can we talk for a minute about those sort of canonical people who didn't come up a lot? Because I was actually shocked at the lack of Biggie and Pac. Just nobody really wanted to talk about Biggie and Pac. Maybe it's because they also know that that memory belongs to the world. It's no longer personal for people, I guess. That's one explanation. They're also such large mythic figures that maybe they didn't, just nobody thought they had anything new to add about it. But every now and then we heard those names. Pac, even less than Big, I think, ultimately. And maybe Pac is just, he's so one of one that people just didn't even feel like they could relate themselves to him. The other big one that I was just surprised, and I think there's probably a lot of reasons for this, is Ye. There's just not a lot of Kanye talk among all 50 of these interviews.
I have a couple of thoughts about Ye specifically. The obvious, number one, but let's skip the obvious. This was something that I was struck by in talking to rappers from the 2010s and a little bit 2020s, as opposed to rappers from the 90s and 2000s, which is no matter where you were in 1995 or 1992 or 1998, no matter where you came from, you're working with pretty much the same set of rap music that everybody else is working from. You're working with New York stuff, you're working with LA stuff, maybe you're working with early Southern stuff, but there weren't very many people who are like, making rap in the 90s that didn't listen to LL Cool J or Big Daddy Kane or Rakim, no matter where.
I think we cut that, but M said that explicitly. He was like, there was a time where you could keep up with all
everything.
Rap. I heard everything that was coming out. Every now and then you'd hear about some new regional stuff, but I could basically keep up.
Even someone like Violent J, who even him being of age, but saying I listened to Esham, that's unexpected. That was like a rare, unexpected left field thing for someone of that generation. But when you get to the younger artists, think about who Trippie Redd was talking about. Obviously, he's talking about Drake on one level, Drake and Wayne, but he's talking about Lil Peep and XXXTentacion. And hip hop is so vast that you could feasibly just pay attention to one small subset of it. This also comes up in the Lil Baby interview where he's naming like Rich Kids and like a bunch of other like teen rap stuff from the 2010s, teen rap Atlanta stuff from the 2010s that even if you grew up in Texas or Florida, maybe you just didn't even know about unless you were on the internet real heavy. That to me was a real difference. There was a sense of common text. I don't want to say monoculture, but shared culture in everybody in the 90s and even into the 2000s. Biggie and Pac, I think, a little spectrally. But once you get to the younger kids, you can absolutely find your way into the genre without paying attention to entire swaths. And this was where Earl, I thought, was fascinating, because Earl was like, it's totally okay to not know any Tupac songs now. Like, that's permitted. And I know that essentially me and Odd Future, like, we're part of the problem, because like we came in the game and we were basically just, we're here and fuck y'all and we're here. But we also knew all that stuff. Like, we knew it all. We just weren't paying attention to it. And we were like trying to make a point. Now everybody takes that energy and doesn't actually do the homework. And Earl was very much, do your homework.
Earl's saying that, which is crazy. He's from like the most non-doing your homework crew ever.
That's what they want you to think, Murph.
I know they waved the flag of it, but I think that's cool.
Lil B was also talking about homework. He was like, I got to listen to the Beastie Boys. I got to get up on the Beastie Boys.
Incredible.
And then he DM'd me yesterday and he was like, you put me on Cool Breeze. I got to learn about Cool Breeze.
No, seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, let's play Watch for the Hook. This is a good moment to play Watch for the Hook, which is not in the package, nor is Cool Breeze, except for a mention.
Never has ever remembered in one crew been so diverse. Trying to outdo the last verse that I burst, that is my curse. Your knight in rhyming armor, sentimentalist slay all grand dragons. Grab the sharpest number 2, then I'm stabbing. Somebody let me hold a number 2 pencil cause they test me. Somebody let me hold a number 2 pencil cause they test me. I fly through the night, yeah. Mixtape raw with some Sprite. Lyrics we put inside you.
Can you talk a little bit about common threads that came up through the interviews that you did? Murph, was there a thing that kind of recurred to the people you talked to and you're like, everybody's thinking the same way about this?
A lot of artists were very proud to wave the flag of their hometown heroes. Like, you would see a lot of people say, Pat, DJ Squeaky, like, he went on a whole soliloquy about his love for DJ Squeaky, being in the club, they're dancing, somebody's gun falls out while they're dancing, and he's, oh man, this is the greatest time of my life, and I'm listening to transcript, really? And it's just crazy that everybody has like that base artist that they latched on to, like with Scarface latched on to a novelty rap song that he liked early on, and he was a DJ, he wasn't even a rapper, so they're coming from different angles, but mostly everyone was, oh yeah, LL, I love LL, I love Nas, I love Kim, I love Foxy. DJ Tony Two-Tone down the street, that dude, or Keisha from around the block that was spitting, she didn't even get a label deal. That type of conversation was just blowing my mind to see like these superstars, DMC talking about listening to pirate radio. Like, what are you talking about? You're like the king of rock. You're like Walk This Way, and you're talking about pirate radio. So yeah, that was cool to hear that synergy of all the artists embracing the unknown acts that did it for them.
One of my favorite examples of that is Elena, again, in the Jubilee transcript, where he's like naming the people who came up with each dance. It'd be like, Billy from over there. Yeah. Then he had a dance. And then like Elena, then she had the dance. The next week she came back with the response. Like, it was just like, it was very detail oriented for like 20 years later. It was very detail oriented.
Well, yeah, everybody wants their shout out. Because again, literally, if you put on Jubilee All right now, I will do all of those dances. You've sort of immortalized those neighborhood people by doing that thing. Forever, I thought the name of the dance was the Elderly Lord. And that's not, it's the Eldon D. Lloyd, because that's his manager's name. And it was like, oh, now I get why that's okay. I got you. But like that. And I think Too Short said the same thing about his hyper local way of getting his tapes out in Oakland. It was like, I know where all of the drug dealers are who have nice cars. So like we basically have a paper route. I go
Incredible.
and give tapes to them and say their names. Or like when we're at parties, shouting out these things and it's like hyper local slang. And to me, like one of the things that came across was how much it meant to people, especially early on, to rock specific crowds. People didn't have a thought in their head that they're like, oh, I want to be on MTV or like whatever else. It was like, I'm determined to kill this block party. I am determined to show up at this club. And like, it means everything to me if so-and-so's there or whatever else. It just wasn't a thought in their head that it was like, I'm going to get in front of some famous people or whatever. It was sort of like, I'm really hoping to impress like this girl.
Real common thread stuff, especially from the folks from the 80s and the 90s, where I think even, frankly, into the 90s, even into the Bad Boy Death Row era, there's still a sense of, could this go away? Could this just not be a thing 5 years from now? Is this going to be the apex? And then everything after this is just a deflation? And so it's really only in the folks from the 2010s where I think there's not that sense of impermanence or instability. People understand that rapping is a career. It's a viable career if you're good, or maybe not, depending on who the person is. But it's a potential viable career choice. And I think that locality that you're talking about, Elena, is very much, I don't know what I'm doing this for. At best, I'm doing it for 20 people or 50 people or 100 people. And honestly, everything outside of that is 1,000% outside of my control.
Exactly. I thought No Name had a good couple bars about like viability and whether she was intentionally not choosing the most viable outcome for her career, which I thought was good.
Her reference points are people who make, frankly, very broadly pop-oriented, talking about well-known people making widely accessed records. But she herself choosing even to be influenced by that, but not make records like that. Again, a fascinating re-entrenchment.
Yeah, she was one of the most interesting interviews.
Yeah, she spoke to Marcus Moore.
Shout out Marcus.
Yeah, I thought that was a real letting down the veil moment to say, I wonder if I should make more commercial music because I really make no money, even though I'm well known.
Should I also just take this moment to say there are other folks who did interviews for the package? Marcus J. Moore, John Abrams, Wesley Morris, Jason Buford, and Reggie Ugwu all contributed to this package. And we tried to get Karen to do one, and we just could not land it, tragically.
Karen tried, but everybody else, we were eternally grateful.
Joe, what are some common threads? Again, you spoke to some of the maybe like, Generation 4 or Generation 6 type artists. Like, what are some through lines that you were picking up on?
What's interesting is what you guys are talking about persisted, the hyper-localness. Even the people who came in the internet era, you mentioned Baby, talking about playing teen club songs from Atlanta, like you would find them on YouTube. So even though people had everything at their fingertips, they were still most immediately moved by the stuff closest to them, people who looked like them, people who sounded like them, people whose references were the same as them. And then there were total swerves of just people talking about stuff you never would have expected. The picture for me of Gucci riding around trapping between Alabama and Georgia, listening to Get Rich or Die Trying in the early 2000s. That's just like
real movie shit.
That's wild. I had a great time talking to some of the undersung guys, Big Gip, Fabo. These are not household names, but these are people who really left their mark. And they had such good attitudes about it. They were just like thrilled to have been along for the ride and to have made the impact that they did. Those guys have sold millions of records, but they're not superstars. They're not on the Grammy stage with LL for the 50th anniversary thing. They're like just a layer below that. And they still had the enthusiasm of fans. I guess that I found that to be a real through line in this. It's like when you're asking people about stuff that they are passionate about with no sort of ulterior motive, they're just like straight up, tell me what you're into. What were you into at this point? What were you into at this point? Everyone will deliver because like ultimately these people are fans. They were fans and they continue to be, even if it's stuff that they only stuff they have nostalgia for.
One thing that was part of what we were hoping would happen, and I think did happen quite a bit, is we were hoping for a de facto family tree, right? We were hoping someone would say, and I'm thinking about Cardi in this case. One thing that I was excited about when we talked to Cardi was not only was she naming Foxy and Kim, which like, sure, obviously at her age, you grew up.
And Trina.
No, but I'm saying she then said Trina, and then she said Kaya and Jackie O. And I'm just like, I'm so excited we get to put Jackie O in this package. That's incredible. Like I wouldn't have had it on the board previously, and I'm really glad. But then you then have Trina, and then Trina talking about the people that she grew up on, including Latifah and I believe MC Lyte, and so and then you have MC Lyte in there, and that's what we were going for. That's what we were hoping would happen. And I think not in every case, but we did get a lot of that, and I'm really happy because I think if you are willing to read the package that way, you're going to learn a lot about how people learn to become the artists that they became.
Murph, you were talking about Scarface sort of not realizing that he's the man to people. And then you can go to the Gip entry and you can see Gip say, Scarface was our Ice Cube in the South, you know, something like that. And that just really brings it full circle, all these moments.
Jumping off your point, Project Pat was not into rapping. He did not consider himself a rapper. The dude was just like, he saw it as just another way of revenue stream, and he just happened to be good at it. But I didn't take this seriously until I heard Scarface. And he's saying the stuff that I'm living. Like, I'm actually going to drug houses at hotels where I'm hearing these stories from pimps, and Scarface is writing this as a song. And he was like, that's when I knew I can do it. It was funny for him to say that, but at the same time say, yeah, I listened to Rapper's Delight, and I heard this song and I heard that song, but that was mostly my brother's stuff. My brother was the guy that had the Nas album that he was listening to, which blew my mind too, of Juicy J standing out to Nas, because I never
You wouldn't think about it. Can I say one highlight of these interviews was hearing rappers rap songs from their childhood that were super important to them?
Oh my God.
Scarface with the Curtis Blow. That's crazy.
Yeah, let's go around. We got to all do one.
Okay, so Murph, you got Scarface rapping Curtis Blow.
Yes.
Okay, I've got two. I have Q-Tip rapping Slick Rick's The Moment I Feared.
Wow.
Truly one of my, that Slick Rick album is one of my favorite albums of all time. Great Adventures of Slick Rick. Let's listen to a little bit of The Moment I Fear.
She says it was great. She says she's glad we had done it. The elevator came and Danny Boy was on it. This was the moment I feared. Hey, yo, what the fuck's going on here? What you doing to my girl? This was the moment I feared. No, y'all ain't just finished fucking.
So Q-Tip rapping that's one of our sidebars in the Q-Tip entry. If you scroll down, we have a whole section with Q-Tip talking about that song specifically. But what you might not have expected, you might expect Q-Tip to rap Slick Rick generationally. What you might not expect was having Pitbull rap AZ's verse and Nas's verse too, but on Life's a Bitch. I didn't have that on on the bingo card. Pitbull is about it. 100%. Pitbull came in and was like, I make these kinds of records. I rap. I do Spanish language. I make some dance-oriented records, some pop-oriented records, but I was raised on all that. I freestyled. I used to ether people. I battled drag on, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think about when you think of the artist. Mr. Worldwide. Anyway, Mr. Worldwide rapped Life's a Bitch, the easy verse to me. That was special.
It was fun to hear RZA talk about the very first hip hop bars that he really memorized or whatever, and then jump back later and start rapping Raekwon. And I'm totally cognizant that definitely playing to your audience, but he was grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side, staying alive. I was like, I see what you did there. I'm for it. I appreciate it. I recognize and that's
our
fine.
that's our tweet. That should be our social tweet for the fact.
Right. But then also Stick, when I was asking him about how, and a lot of these guys have the same story about learning to rap by writing down other artists' lyrics and going over them and figuring it out. But Stick from Dead Prez was saying he was learning Big Daddy Kane, but his thing was he didn't know bars. He just was trying to figure it out through breathing. So when you stop, then I'll stop. And so he starts rapping some Big Daddy Kane, and it's you hear him take the breath on the tape, and you're like, that's crazy that you are basically teaching yourself musical theory, and who better to learn from, really.
There's also a really good thing in your Crazy Bone interview where he's talking about writing out LL Cool J, but also where he says we liked rappers who didn't stop. If you, he made that distinction between rappers who did a rhyme and then paused versus rappers who are rapping through the beat. Earl, I'm sure, understood this exactly when he reads the Crazy Bone entry. Talking about Biz Markie or whoever who just is going through the beat. And if you listen to anything in Bone Thugs, the one thing you know is there's no breathing. And if there is, it's not where it's supposed to be, quote unquote.
and then I had Fabo rapping Bone Thugs, which
incredible.
Was talking about learning to rap through Bone Thugs. Also Wayne rapping Jay-Z, which is He does that at his shows. He mentioned that people think the verse from Lucky Me is his, even though it's him quoting Jay, who he's obsessed with, who he called his Bible. And then to bring it full circle, hearing Azealia Banks rap Lil Wayne canon, and she did the entire verse basically and just wouldn't stop. Like, I kept thinking she was going to stop and she just kept going.
Banks is so interesting to me. She's like this enigma that like people want to play her as some troll under the bridge, but at the same time, she's like brilliant. And at the same time, she's nuts. And like, it's just a bunch of things
she's all
together.
Of it. Great music critic.
Yeah.
An amazing music critic. We had conversations about artists that didn't make it. She had insight on Kodak. She had insight on Pop Smoke. She is a true ear and has a way with words, as we all know.
You want to think she's overstating the impact of 212, but she is not. Like, when you talked about that album, I'm like, that's facts.
Yeah, that record goes.
Yeah. Can we listen to Canon and 212?
Yeah, of course. Maybe we'll go out on 2, but let's listen to Canon right now. Lil Wayne.
Howdy do, cowboy. It's Young Weezy since you bitchin' and I'm a tote. Canon. That's right. Listen close. I got duct tape and rope. I leave you missing like D.O. Bannons. One hand on my money, one hand on my buddy. That's the AK-47. Make your neighborhood love me. Them bullets like birds. You can hear them things on me. I'm flying around your city with a damn weak stomach.
Murph, Elena, I appreciate y'all coming through for talking about the 50 Rappers package. I'm just going to read every name that's in this package just for posterity so that everybody gets mentioned, because we didn't get to talk about everybody. This is it's a random refresh because I wanted it to not seem ordinal in any way. So this is just what happens to me on my screen right now. Lil Bibby, Ice Spice, Busta Rhymes, Easy AD, Kumo D, Big Boy, Lil B, MC Light, Fonte, Roxanne Shante, Cool Keith, Rock Marciano, Scarface, E40, RZA, Paul Wall, Eve, Uncle Luke, Q-Tip, Gucci Mane, Pitbull, Big Gip, Ice Cube, LL Cool J, DJ Hollywood, Lil Wayne, Boots Riley, Fabo, Lil Baby, Azealia Banks, Project Pat, Stick, Trippie Redd, 50 Cent, Ladybug Mecca, Trina, DJ Jubilee, Cameron, Too Short Vanilla Ice, DMC, Eminem, Cardi B, Earl Sweatshirt, Crazy Bone, Slug, Violent J, No Name, Styles P, Bun B, whatever, put Violent J next to No Name. That's a sick part of the algorithm.
Insane.
But that's why we did. This is why we did it. And the final 4 names: Keith Murphy, Elena Bergeron, Joe Coscarelli, John Caramonica. Listen to every podcast ever at nytimes.com/podcast. Email us, podcast@nytimes.com. Tell us what you liked, who you would have loved to have heard from. Get in the Discord, get in the Facebook group, tinyurl.com/podcast Discord or /podcast Facebook. Subscribe to Popcast anywhere you get your audio content. That's Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We are on YouTube. Popcast Deluxe, which is me and Joe looking at each other in beautiful chairs, is also on YouTube every week. Our producer is Pedro Rosado from Head Stepper Media. We will be back next week. This is 212.
Hey, I can be the answer. I'm ready to dance when the vamp up. Then when I hit that dip, get your camera. You can see